Spock is a widely known symbol in the Star Trek universe, involved in every episode of the original series, including the pilot, all 6 original series movies, as well as in the reboots, both Kelvin and TOS versions, 2 episodes in The Next Generation, and is mentioned various times across the entire franchise. Played originally by Leonard Nimoy, with his newer Kelvin counterpart played by Zachary Quinto, Spock was originally perceived as half Martian with reddish skin and a satanic face, but instead ended up as half Vulcan with green blood and telepathic abilities. Also, blue eyeshadow, but I digress. He was the only character in the first Star Trek pilot episode The Cage to carry on as a main character in the original series, and was more emotional in the pilot than TOS. Number 1, a character concept that was dropped after The Cage, being the one who was supposed to be colder and more stoic. Born from a human mother, Amanda Grayson, and a Vulcan father, Ambassador Sarek, Spock is in a constant battle to keep his human side under wraps and react with only strict, cold logic, as he decided to follow the footsteps of the Vulcan side of his family. As revealed in Journey to Babel, Spock was bullied as a child and even got into fights with other Vulcan children due to his mixed heritage, being teased in the animated series episode Yesteryear for not even being able to do a simple Vulcan neck pinch. Although almost in denial of his human side during part of his life, there were periods where Spock would let his emotions come through, such as in Plato's Stepchildren, where he is upset because the beings on the planet telekinetically manipulated him into miming stepping on Kirk, and with his enormous strength, Spock could have easily killed the captain. What many people do not realize, however, is that Vulcans do, in fact, feel emotion. Very strong and violent emotion, in fact. They simply control it and base their actions on logic, not what they are feeling. I personally believe it took Spock quite a while to fully understand that, as he tended to blame the emotions he felt on his human blood. Spock's career in Starfleet started out a bit rough, as Sarek basically disowned him after Spock chose to go to Starfleet Academy, not the Vulcan Science Academy as his father wished. This led to an 18-year period of non-contact, which was finally rectified in Journey to Babel, when Sarek finally begins to understand Spock better and sees that he has made a good life for himself in Starfleet. After Starfleet Academy, Spock was assigned as a cadet to the USS Enterprise as a science officer under Captain Pike and was later commissioned as an ensign. It was during this period that the events of The Cage happened. After Pike left the Enterprise, Spock stayed on under James T. Kirk as the first officer and science officer for the most well-known 5-year mission in Star Trek history, even if the original series only lasted 3 years. Spock was incredibly loyal to both Captain Pike and Kirk, going so far as to both feloniously break a law and commit mutiny to bring Pike to a place where he would not suffer from the extreme injuries caused by radiation damage, which basically turned him into a mind inside a box that could only respond to yes or no questions, while at the same time keeping everyone, including Kirk, in the dark, because if things were to go wrong, he did not want anyone else to get in trouble. Although court-martialed, his actions were deemed okay due to extenuating circumstances, and he was not punished. Spock experienced his first Ponfar, the Vulcan mating drive, on the Enterprise and attempted to keep it secret, but the meddling of Kirk and Dr. McCoy, and the fact that the Enterprise was actually ordered to not make a stop at Vulcan, forced him to explain. T'Pring, his mate, was telepathically bonded to him at 7, but decided that she did not want to marry him as he was a legend, and she wanted another Vulcan named Ston. Through a somewhat convoluted, although logical plan that I'm not going to go into right now, T'Pring chose the challenge option in the Vulcan marriage ceremony and made Spock fight against Kirk in a fight to the death. If you're wondering why Kirk would agree to this, it's because he acted rashly like he tends to do, and didn't actually realize that it was a death battle type scenario. Due to the quick thinking of Dr. McCoy, who was the other close friend Spock invited to the ceremony, Kirk only seemed to die, but not before Spock had any idea what was going on. He realized he did not want T'Pring anymore, as the shock of Kirk's death snapped him out of Ponfar. Before he could actually arrest himself, though, McCoy revealed that Kirk was indeed alive, which leads to the one Spock moment in which he displays genuine happiness. As he increased in age, Spock began committing to more diplomatic duties and eventually became an ambassador like his father. He assisted in the Khitomer Accords and attempted to reunite the Romulans with Vulcan, something Sarek did not think would be successful and led to yet another rift between father and son that was only rectified after Sarek's death. In true fashion, Spock actually ran off to Romulus for his reunification attempts without telling anyone, and ended up having Starfleet send Picard to look for him, because no one actually knew where he was. He eventually ended up in the Kelvin timeline, when his attempt to save Romulus from his son going nova failed, and he ended up going from the resulting black hole into the Kelvin dimension. He apparently died in Star Trek Beyond. However, as he plays a part as a narrator to events and places in Star Trek Online, a CBS-affiliated MMORPG taking place at the beginning of the 26th century, and it can be very obviously inferred that it made it back from the Kelvin dimension, his death could be considered a gray area. Spock never fully allowed himself to succumb to the aspects of romance while on the Enterprise, although he was affected by spores, time shifts, and drugs, and, yes, Ponfar, that forced him to act out on the emotion. Nurse Christine Chapel had an unrequited crush on Spock and displayed it throughout the series. When Spock never returned her affections, she eventually ended up using a love potion on him, which completely disabled his ability to do his duty and got Nurse Chapel into a lot of trouble. And if that wasn't enough, he also sustained quite a few injuries during duty, some of which included being shot with a gun, being shot with a disruptor, having an amoebic entity nearly kill him twice, being blinded by Dr. McCoy, nearly being killed by plant venom, getting hit by a force field, and getting struck by lightning all in the same episode, and, of course, actually dying. Speaking of death, Spock's experience with dying and coming back to life, as well as his experience with V'ger after failing Kolinar, enabled him to come to terms with both his Vulcan and human sides and further understand himself. Throughout the original series, Spock is actually insulted by being called emotional and complimented when told that he would make a very good computer. He even chooses to attempt to fully purge his emotions via Kolinar at the beginning of the motion picture, but after the events of the movie, you see a shift in how he feels about himself and his heritage. As he says to his brother Sivok in Star Trek V, "I am not that outcast boy you left behind many years ago. Since that time, I have found myself and my place and know who I am." Spock found where he belonged on the Enterprise and created many important relationships with the crew there. Obviously, he was very close and akin to brothers with Captain Kirk. The sentiment was stated in the Season 3 episode, Whom Gods Destroy, and again at the end of Star Trek V. Spock was also good friends with Dr. McCoy, and probably just as close, as you can see times where Dr. McCoy understands when something is troubling Spock and tries to help him. Dr. McCoy was the one who thought something was wrong with Spock when he was starting to experience Ponfar, while Kirk originally just thought Spock was in one of his moods. Spock also took on almost a mentoring role to Chekhov, explaining what the young ensign didn't understand and having him assist with certain projects. In The Spectre of the Gun, after Chekhov dies, Scotty and McCoy berate Spock for not emotionally reacting, as he was the one who worked closely with Chekhov. Spock then responds to the attack by saying that they forget he is half human, implying that he did feel grief for the poor ensign. Spock has become a symbol for many outcasts. A child of two worlds, he is like many of us that are different, battling within himself for who he wants to become and trying to find a place where he belongs. He wants to be accepted instead of ridiculed and berated due to his not fitting in, and eventually he finds that. Although it takes a bit, Spock finds where he truly belongs on the Enterprise and finally has a place where he fits. He makes something of his life and turns out okay in the end. The most important thing that anyone should take away from Spock is that while he is a great and fun character, he's the ultimate success story for those of us who do not fit in with the rest of society and shows us that everyone can find a place where they belong, even if it takes a little while.